Keeps blocking black wealth. We digging deep to free ourselves.
Welcome to Who Keeps Blocking Black Wealth, a podcast about money, systems, and the truth behind both. I'm Dana Mitchell, MBA, financial advisor, and someone who believes if we can understand the system, we can use it.
And I'm Harold. My last name ain't important, but my facts are.
As you can see, Harold is a bit surly.
I'm not surly. It's today's economic headlines.
Fair enough. Well, Harold, before we get into today's topic, let's talk about what's going on right now and what it actually means to us. Because this week, Brent crude and oil futures are back in the headlines. And every time that happens, gas prices follow. But here's the part most people don't see. When you hear Brent crude and futures, you're not just hearing about oil. You're hearing about expectations. Futures markets are traders placing bets on what they believe oil will cost in the future. Not what it costs today, what they think is coming. So if there's tension in the Middle East, concerns about supply routes, or even just uncertainty in global markets, prices can move before a single drop of oil is actually affected, which means by the time you see prices rising at the pump, you're not paying for a shortage. You're paying for anticipation.
And somehow, that anticipation hits us a little harder.
Now, here's the myth. Gas is always higher in Black communities. Outbeat. And for a lot of people listening, that doesn't sound like a myth. That sounds like reality.
Because you can drive 10 minutes, and suddenly the price changes.
So let's break it down because the feeling is real, but the mechanism is deeper. Gas prices are often higher in urban areas. And urban areas come with higher land costs, higher taxes, higher regulatory requirements, and tighter infrastructure. But here's the part nobody talks about. Who sets those taxes? Who approves zoning? Who decides where refineries, pipelines, and storage facilities can and cannot go? Beats local government.
The same elections people skip.
Exactly. City councils decide zoning. State governments influence fuel taxes. Local policy determines whether your area has supply access or supply constraints. So when prices are higher in certain areas, that's not random. That's policy. And policy comes from participation or the lack of it. Now, layer Brent crude on top of that. Oil futures don't just price reality, they price expectation, conflict, shipping routes, supply fears. So prices can rise before anything physically changes.
So now we're paying for what might happen on top of where we live, based on decisions we didn't vote on.
That's the system. And let's take it a step further because petroleum isn't just gasoline. It's not just what goes in your tank. It's what's in your life. Vaseline,
Plastics, synthetic fabrics, packaging, electronics components,
cosmetics, medical supplies, even parts of the food supply chain depend on petroleum-based inputs. So when oil prices move, everything moves.
and don't forget liquefied natural gas.
That's not abstract. That's heat in your home. That's your utility bill. That's whether grandma can afford to keep the oven on long enough to bake that sweet potato pie and auntie's mac and cheese.
So now energy isn't just transportation, it's survival.
Precisely. So here's the real takeaway. The myth says they're charging us more. The system says you're living inside decisions that were made without your input. And if you don't connect your daily costs to policy, to participation, then every increase will feel like a mystery to blame on they. But it's not a mysterious they. It's a system. And systems respond to those who show up. You know, this actually lines up with something in Amos. because you trample on the poor and take from them levies of grain. You have built houses of hewn stone, but you shall not dwell in them. That's not just spiritual language. That's describing a system where people are producing but not benefiting from what they produce.
Now see, that's a word right there. But people don't like to sit with that part, because that means the problem ain't always effort. Sometimes it's how the whole thing is set up. Proverbs says, "The getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a snare of death." Meaning, if the system is built on something shaky, it's not going to produce stability, no matter who's working inside it.
And if you step back and look at both of those together, they're describing the same thing from two angles. One shows you the outcome, people producing without fully benefiting. The other shows you the foundation, a system that looks stable but isn't built to hold evenly. That's global and local at the same time. Global in how the system is structured and local in how it shows up where you live.
And that's where it hits the individual. Because if you don't understand what you're standing in, you start adjusting yourself. Instead of adjusting your strategy, you work harder, you push more, and never stop to ask if the system you're in is built to return what you're putting into it.
You know, I wouldn't be me without veering over into the New Testament, where in James it says, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." Because once you understand what you're looking at, you can't just acknowledge it. You have to respond to it.
Yeah. Once you see it, you don't get to pretend you don't.
And that's where the shift happens. Understanding turns into action.
Yeah. That's the part people don't always like. Because once you understand it, you can't just sit with it either. That understanding comes with responsibility. How you move, what you participate in, what you tolerate.
You don't get to say you didn't know anymore.
All right. Before Dana chimes in and we truly begin preaching, coffee break.
Because even this conversation requires energy.
Strong Coffee Company. Protein, healthy fats, no crash.
Because financial stress is already enough.
Use code WKBBW. Same coffee, less money, overpaying voluntarily is not a wealth strategy.
Now let's focus on today's topic. Here's another staggering number that keeps me up at night. $40,000. That's how much the average person in a banking desert spends just on basic financial services over their lifetime. Money that could have been building generational wealth instead of disappearing into transaction fees.
That really puts the systemic barriers into perspective. And when we look at how these costs compound across generations, we're talking about millions in lost wealth building potential.
You know what's fascinating about this whole issue? When we dig into the data about wealth inequality, particularly around race, it's not just about historical redlining anymore. Modern technology is actually reinforcing these old patterns in surprising ways.
Tell me more about how that's happening. Are we talking about those AI lending algorithms I've been hearing about?
Exactly right. And here's where it gets really interesting. These algorithms, which are supposed to be totally objective, are showing bias rates sometimes even higher than human lenders. They're learning from historical data that's already skewed by decades of discriminatory practices.
Well, that's particularly concerning since more and more financial decisions are being automated these days.
Let me share something that really demonstrates this impact. A recent study showed that in neighborhoods with similar income levels, Black mortgage applicants are still 80% more likely to be denied loans than white applicants. And get this, even when they're approved, they're often charged higher interest rates.
Those numbers are shocking. And it's not just about mortgages, right? I've seen similar patterns in small business lending.
Oh man, the small business data is even more striking. Black entrepreneurs are more than twice as likely to be denied business loans, even when controlling for credit scores and business performance. We're talking about billions in lost economic opportunity.
And those denials have ripple effects throughout entire communities, don't they?
Absolutely right. And here's what makes it even more complex. When Black owned businesses do get approved for loans, they receive about half the amount of white owned businesses with similar profiles. It's like running a race where some participants have to carry extra weight.
That reminds me of some research I saw about banking deserts in predominantly Black neighborhoods. The lack of traditional banking services creates this whole cascade of financial challenges.
Let me build on that point because it's crucial. In these banking deserts, people often rely on check cashing services and payday loans, which can charge anywhere from 300% to 700% annual percentage rates. It's literally paying a premium for being poor.
So what you're saying is that these communities are essentially trapped in a cycle of higher costs for basic financial services.
Exactly. And here's what makes it even more frustrating. Studies show that when traditional banks do open branches in these neighborhoods, they tend to offer more limited services and higher fees than branches in other areas.
That really challenges the narrative about personal responsibility being the only factor in wealth building.
You know what's interesting though? Some communities are finding innovative ways around these barriers. I've been tracking these community investment trusts that pool resources to invest in local real estate development. They're seeing some impressive returns.
Those alternative models sound promising. Have you seen any data on their success rates?
Well, here's something encouraging. These community-based lending programs often show default rates lower than traditional banks. They're proving that when you understand a community's needs and potential, you can make smart investments that traditional metrics might miss.
That really turns the conventional wisdom about risk assessment on its head, doesn't it?
And here's what I think is most exciting about all this. We're starting to see some mainstream financial institutions adopt these alternative approaches. They're realizing there's actually profit potential in addressing these historical inequities.
That shift from seeing it as charity to seeing it as opportunity could be a real game changer.
Looking ahead, I think we're at a crucial moment where technology could either worsen these disparities or help solve them. It really depends on how we design and implement these systems.
That's why having these conversations and understanding these patterns is so important.
You know what keeps me optimistic? Studies suggest that closing the racial wealth gap could add up to $1.5 trillion to the U.S. economy over the next decade. That's not just good for affected communities, it's good for everyone.
Now, that's the kind of perspective that could really change how people think about this issue.
So here's the truth. Wealth inequality isn't always about effort, it's about structure. And once you understand the structure, you stop being confused by the outcome.
And start moving different.
Exactly.
All this talk about systems got me tired.
Tired or just worn out from fighting reality.
Both.
Well, when it's time to actually rest, I'm reaching for my cozy earth sheets because after a long day like this, comfort isn't optional. These are made from viscose, from bamboo, super soft, breathable, and honestly, once you lay down, you're not getting back up. If you're going to recharge, you might as well do it right. Go to cozyearth.com. Use code WKBBW. Get 40% off. Wrap yourself in luxury.
Yeah, I'm logging off early tonight.
If this episode helped bring clarity, stay with us. Follow the show. Share it with someone who needs it. This show exists to shine a light on the knowledge our community has believed was hidden so we can understand it and use it to our advantage.
Because once you understand the rules,
you stop guessing. Pray, plan, prosper on purpose.
Share this with somebody who needs receipts.
Who keeps blocking black wealth? We digging deep to